Hi guys, it's Miss Sarah from the West Bank Club to lead you on a virtual field trip through some of the really cool places you can find downtown. First up is Canal Street and the Neutral Ground. Right now it is filled with streetcars and lots of traffic, but originally Canal Street was meant to be an actual canal attaching the Mississippi River and Lake Pontchartrain. So after they named it Canal Street, they also had this big open area between both sides of the street. And on one side is where the French lived, also known as the French Quarter. And then on the other side, where the Central Business District is, the Spanish and the Americans lived. And during that time, they did not get along. So in this big open space between the streets, what we call the neutral ground is called the neutral ground because that's where the French, the American, and the Spanish would all go to trade, to get along. They wouldn't pay taxes, and it was a place where there wasn't any fighting. And if you didn't know this, New Orleans and parts of Louisiana are the only places that call that area the neutral ground. Where I'm from in Mississippi, they call it the median. And I was really confused when I first moved down here. Next up on our field trip is Jackson Square. So this is where a big statue of Andrew Jackson is. And it's got a lot of history around it, but what I want to talk about is the history of the actual statue. And if you look around, you can see lots of big houses that line the square. And in one of those houses, there used to be a woman called Baroness Pontable. And she was from France and moved over here. And when she lived here, she was a really popular woman, really important woman in the city of society. But while she was here, Andrew Jackson would not tip his hat to her. And tipping your hat to someone back in those times was a sign of respect. It was kind of like a bow, but just a little bit of one. So she was pretty offended that Andrew Jackson wouldn't tip his hat to her. And after he passed away and then named the square for Andrew Jackson, she decided she was going to help fund a statue. So the Baroness paid for a statue of Andrew Jackson in the middle of Jackson Square. But if you look at the statue, he is riding his horse and tipping his hat towards one side of the square where the Baroness used to live. So she made a statue of Andrew Jackson showing respect to her for the rest of her life and the rest of his, just because he wouldn't do that when he was alive and seeing her in person. So that's one way to kind of knock it to Andrew Jackson. And our last stop is the French Market. The French Market has been here in this location, filled with shops for almost as long as the city has been here. But actually, even before any European settlers came, the Native Americans used this spot because of how it sets up on the levee to trade with the ships that came by. And once the European settlers came, they started trading with the Native Americans in this spot. And then as they took over more of the city, they used it for their own trading post. And what we see now is based off of an African-American architecture design from the 1870s. He set up the way that we see it now with these big open spaces and how it's a big fresh air market. That's based off of his designs. So it's got a lot of history dating back older than the city, and the design we look at today is from an African-American. So next time you're downtown, look at all the places around you. See if you can find more history outside of what you've been taught in school. So see you next week.